My daughter's lawyer handed me the eviction notice at 9:47 in the morning on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I'd just come back from my walk in Riverside Park, and the kitchen clock, the one my late husband Gerald had hung 43 years ago, was chiming as the doorbell rang. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm attorney Philip Castellano representing your daughter, Vanessa Hartwell," the young man said, not quite meeting my eyes. He couldn't have been more than 35. "I'm here to serve you with a legal eviction notice. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." I stood there in my doorway, my hand still on the knob, wearing my walking shoes and my favorite purple cardigan. Behind me, I could hear the coffee maker gurgling. I'd set it to brew before my walk, the way I did every morning. The smell of French roast filled the house, my house, the house Gerald and I had bought in 1982 for $67,000 and had paid off by 1998. "Excuse me?" I said, though I'd heard him perfectly well. "Your daughter holds the deed to this property," he continued, pulling out papers from his leather briefcase. "She's invoking her legal right to occupy the premises. You're currently residing here without a lease agreement, which constitutes—" "I gave her the deed," I interrupted, my voice steady even though my hands had started to shake. "I transferred it to her name 6 months ago. But this is still my home." "Not legally, ma'am." He held out the papers. "You need to sign here acknowledging receipt of this notice." That's when I heard footsteps on my stairs, my beautiful oak staircase that Gerald had refinished by hand one summer. And my daughter appeared. Vanessa, my only child. The girl I'd rocked through colic and walked through chicken pox and sat up with during teenage heartbreaks. She was 42 now, wearing an expensive navy suit I didn't recognize and an expression I barely recognized either. "Mother," she said, not mom, not mama, but mother. "This doesn't have to be difficult. Derek and I need the house. We have 3 children now, and our place in the suburbs is too small. You're just one person. You don't need 4 bedrooms and a garden." "I raised you in this house," I said quietly. "Your father died in the bedroom upstairs." "And we appreciate everything you've done," her husband Derek said, appearing behind her with that smile I'd never trusted, not since the day Vanessa brought him home 11 years ago. "But facts are facts. The house is in Vanessa's name. You signed it over. We've been generous letting you stay this long, but we need you out by Friday." "Friday?" I repeated. "That's 3 days." 72 hours, as specified in the eviction notice," the lawyer said, and I noticed he still wasn't looking at me directly. Maybe he had a grandmother. Maybe this made him uncomfortable. I hoped it did. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Vanessa shrugged. "There's a very nice senior living community on Maple Street, Pine Grove Assisted Living. We looked into it. It's $2,800 a month, which your Social Security and pension should just about cover." "Assisted living?" I was 71 years old, but I walked 3 miles every morning, managed my own finances, drove myself to the grocery store, and belonged to 3 book clubs. "I don't need assistance. I need my home." "The decision has been made," Derek said firmly. "We'll help you pack. We're not monsters." But they were. Or at least, they'd become something I didn't recognize. Vanessa, my daughter, whom I'd cradled and loved and sacrificed everything for, was standing in my living room telling me I had 3 days to leave the only home I'd known for over 40 years. "I'd like you all to leave now," I said, taking the papers from the lawyer with as much dignity as I could manage. "I understand the situation. I'll be out by Friday." After they left, Vanessa clicking away in her heels without even a backward glance, Derek actually whistling as he went down my front steps. I closed the door and stood in my empty hallway for a long moment. Then I walked to my kitchen, poured myself that cup of coffee, and sat down at my table. And I smiled, because what they didn't know was that I had already been planning. What they didn't know was that this 71-year-old woman had one more card to play. And what Derek and Vanessa certainly didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for the past 3 months. but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how this all really started. 2 months earlier, I'd been living my normal life. I was happy, or at least content. Gerald had been gone for 5 years, a heart attack that took him quickly, which the doctor said was a blessing, though it never felt like one, and I'd learned to be alone without being lonely. My days had a rhythm. I woke at 6:30, made coffee, walked my 3 miles through Riverside Park where I'd chat with the other morning walkers, mostly people my age, though sometimes younger folks with dogs would nod hello. I'd come home, shower, have breakfast while reading the newspaper, then spend my mornings however I pleased. Sometimes I'd garden. Sometimes I'd volunteer at the library. Tuesdays and Thursdays I had my watercolor class at the community center. I had my WhatsApp group with 3 friends from my neighborhood, Patricia Brennan, Doris Yu, and Margaret O'Sullivan. We'd all been living on the same street for decades, raising our children together, attending the same church socials and PTA meetings. Now we were the old guard, sharing pictures of grandchildren and complaining about our various aches and pains. My pension from 30 years of teaching elementary school was $2,400 a month, plus my Social Security of $1,650. I had $143,000 in savings, Gerald's life insurance plus what we'd saved over the years. The house was paid off. I had a 10-year-old Honda Civic that ran perfectly well. I was comfortable, secure. Then Vanessa started visiting more often. At first, I was delighted. She'd been distant after marrying Derek, moving to their suburban split level 40 minutes away, having her 3 children in quick succession, Lily, now 10, Owen, 8, and Harper, 6. I understood she was busy. Young mothers are always busy. I remembered that time in my own life, when Vanessa was small, and Gerald was working long hours and every day felt like running a marathon. But that March, she started dropping by every week, sometimes twice a week. She'd bring the children, which I loved, though Derek never came. The kids would run through my garden while Vanessa and I would sit in my kitchen drinking tea. "Mom, this house is so big," she said one afternoon in late March. "Don't you ever feel like it's too much to manage?" I looked around my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught her to bake cookies, where Gerald and I had shared thousands of meals, where I still felt his presence in the worn spot by the coffee maker where he'd always stood. "It's home," I said simply. "But the maintenance," Vanessa pressed. "The property taxes, the utilities, it must cost a fortune." "I manage fine," I told her. "Your father and I always kept the house in good repair, and property taxes are only $4,200 a year." She blinked. "That's all? I thought they'd be much higher." I should have noticed something in her tone then, but she was my daughter. You don't expect your daughter to be calculating your expenses while drinking your tea. "The neighborhood has stayed pretty stable," I explained. "We got lucky. Some areas nearby have gone up astronomically, but this street has mostly stayed the same families." She was quiet for a moment, stirring her tea. Then, "Have you thought about what will happen to the house when you eventually die?" I said it plainly because I'd never been one to dance around words. "Of course. It's in my will. Everything goes to you. You're my only child." "Right, but wills go through probate," Vanessa said. "That can take months, even years. And there are taxes, legal fees. The house could lose so much value just sitting in legal limbo." "I suppose," I said, though I didn't like the direction of the conversation. "What if," she said, leaning forward, "what if you just transferred the deed to me now? That way, when the time comes, there's no legal hassle. Everything's already in my name. It would save so much money and stress." I frowned. "But it's my security. This house is everything I have." "Mom, don't be silly," she laughed, reaching over to pat my hand. "You'd still live here. Obviously. This is your home. I would never, ever take that away from you. I just mean legally. On paper, it would be in my name. To save you from probate later." I've been talking to Derek about estate planning, and this is what all the financial advisors recommend. I don't know, I said slowly. Think about it, she urged. Really, Mom, it's the smart thing to do. And it would give me such peace of mind knowing that everything's settled. You know how I worry about you. She visited 3 more times over the next 2 weeks, each time bringing it up. She brought articles about probate. She mentioned a friend whose mother had died and whose estate had been tied up for 18 months. She talked about how expensive elder law attorneys were, how much they charged just to manage a simple estate. And like a fool, I started to listen. I signed the deed transfer on April 15th. I remember the date because it was tax day, and I'd made a little joke about it being appropriate since we were dealing with financial matters. The lawyer Vanessa brought, a different one, not the man who would later serve me with the eviction notice, explained everything very carefully. The property would transfer to Vanessa's name. I would retain the right to live in the house. That right is verbal, correct? The lawyer had asked. There's no formal lease agreement? She's my mother, Vanessa had said, laughing as if the question was absurd. Of course she'll live here. This is her home. I signed. The lawyer notarized it. Vanessa hugged me and told me I'd done the right thing, the smart thing, and that she loved me so much. For about 2 weeks, nothing changed. Then Derek started showing up. The first time, he claimed he was just dropping off Vanessa's van to be serviced at a shop nearby. Could he wait at my house for the mechanic to call? Of course, I said. He was my son-in-law. He sat in my living room, but instead of making conversation, he walked around looking at things, touching things. This is a really nice entertainment center, he said, running his hand over the oak cabinet Gerald had built. Original woodwork? Gerald made it, I said. Valuable, then. He pulled out his phone and took a picture of it. What are you doing? I asked. Oh, just, appreciating the craftsmanship. He smiled that smile again. The second time he came, he brought a measuring tape, said he was helping a friend plan a renovation and wanted to check some dimensions. Could he measure a few things in my house? It seemed odd, but I said yes. He measured the living room, the dining room, both bathrooms. Great bones, he kept saying. Really great bones. The third time, he didn't even make an excuse. He just showed up at 7 in the evening, walked in, and started looking through my kitchen cabinets. Excuse me, I said sharply. What are you doing? Just seeing what needs to be replaced, he said casually. These cabinets are pretty dated, Dorothy. We'll probably tear them out. We? I repeated. He looked at me as if I was being slow. When we move in, Vanessa and I have been talking. The house is in her name now. Our place is too small for our growing family. It makes sense for us to live here. It's a much better neighborhood for the kids. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This is my house. Actually, it's not. He closed the cabinet door. It's Vanessa's house. Check the deed. But I live here. For now, he said. But Dorothy, be realistic. You're 71. You don't need this much space. There are plenty of nice senior communities around here. You'd probably be happier around people your own age anyway. Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me? Get out of my house. My voice was stronger now. Now, he shrugged. Fine, but you should think about what I said. We'll need to make this transition eventually. Might as well start planning. After he left, I called Vanessa immediately. Mom, Derek told me you were upset, she said, her voice patient, as if she were talking to a child. Look, we're not throwing you out on the street. We just need to have realistic conversations about the future. You promised this was just about probate, I said. You promised I would always live here. And you can. But Mom, you have to understand our position. We have 3 kids. Our mortgage is $200 a month. We're drowning financially. And you have this huge house just sitting here with one person in it. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense to me. It's my home. It's my house, she said. and there was something new in her voice, something hard. Legally, it's my property. I've been talking to lawyers, Mom. I've been talking to financial advisors. And everyone agrees that we've been more than fair, but we can't keep carrying our own housing costs when we own a perfectly good house that's being underutilized. Underutilized? I repeated, stunned. I live here. I've lived here for over 40 years. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We'll help you find a nice place. We'll help you move, but you need to start accepting reality. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen, and I cried. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears running down my face, because I'd just realized what I'd done. I'd given away my security to my own daughter, and she was going to take everything from me. But I only cried for about 10 minutes. Then I dried my eyes, made myself a cup of tea, and opened my laptop. I pulled up WhatsApp and started typing to my group. Dorothy here. Need advice. Legal situation with Vanessa and the house. Urgent. Within minutes, all three of them responded. Patricia. Call me right now. Doris. Oh, honey, what happened? Margaret. I knew that son-in-law was trouble. Knew it. The four of us met the next morning at Patricia's house. She made coffee and set out some cookies, and I told them everything. Every detail, from Vanessa's first suggestion about the deed transfer to Derek's measurements, to my daughter's cold voice on the phone. You need a lawyer, Patricia said immediately. She'd been a paralegal before retiring. The deed transfer might be contestable if you can prove it was obtained under false pretenses. But I signed willingly, I said miserably. I was stupid, but I wasn't forced. Doesn't matter. If she misrepresented her intentions, that's fraud. Elder financial abuse is a real thing, Dorothy, and it's illegal. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling my old boss, Richard Sterling. He's an attorney who specializes in elder law. He owes me a favor. I can't afford, I started. First consultation is free, Patricia said firmly, and we'll figure out the rest. Nobody does this to one of us. Margaret leaned over and squeezed my hand. My sister went through something similar with her son. He took everything, but she fought back and won. You can too. Doris was typing furiously on her phone. I'm sending you a link to an article about documenting elder abuse. Starting today, you need to write down everything. Every visit, every conversation, every phone call, dates, times, what was said, and if possible, start recording. Recording? I said doubtfully. Your phone has a voice recorder app, she said. Use it. When they call, when they visit, turn it on. Keep your phone in your pocket. You need evidence. Is that legal? I asked. In this state? Yes, Patricia confirmed. Single-party consent. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it without telling them. So that's what I did. I met with Richard Sterling 3 days later. He was about 60, with kind eyes and a very serious expression as he read through the deed transfer documents I'd brought. Mrs. Whitmore, he said carefully, this is a legally binding transfer. Your daughter owns this house now. That's not in question. My heart sank. However, he continued, there are a few things working in your favor. First, if you can prove she obtained this deed through misrepresentation, that she explicitly told you that you would continue to live here and that this was only for probate purposes, we might have grounds for a fraud claim. Do you have any of those conversations in writing? Some text messages, I said. I can look. Do that. Second, even though she owns the house, she can't just throw you out without proper legal process. If you've lived there for 40 years, you have certain rights. And third, he paused. This might sound strange, but have you ever paid her rent? Rent? No. She's my daughter. Was my house. I thought not. That's actually good. Because if you've been living there without paying rent, without a lease, and you've been there for decades, you're what's called a licensee rather than a tenant. The eviction process is more complicated for a licensee, especially one with your long-term residency. She'll have to prove that it's reasonable to make you leave. Can she do that? I asked quietly. He sighed. Probably, eventually. She owns the property. But we can slow it down. We can make it difficult. And we can use that time to explore other options. What other options? Well, how much do you have in savings? I told him, $143,000. He thought for a moment. Houses in your neighborhood are selling for what? Around $400,000? Something like that. Maybe $380,000 to $420,000 depending on condition. So here's a thought, he said slowly. What if you offered to buy the house back from her? She'd make a profit. You transferred it for the value of $0, presumably as a gift, and you'd get your home back. I shook my head. I don't have $400,000, and I'm 71. No bank would give me a mortgage. You don't need a mortgage for the full amount. You have $143,000. We could structure an offer where you pay her that as a down payment and then make monthly payments until the full amount is paid, or until you don't need the house anymore. It's creative, but it might work. She'd never agree, I said. She wants me out. Her husband is pushing for it. Probably not, he agreed. But it's worth trying. And in the meantime, we prepare for battle. Because Mrs. Whitmore, if your daughter tries to evict you, we're going to make her work for it. And we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what she's doing. That afternoon, I went home and spent 3 hours searching through my phone. I found 17 text messages from Vanessa, spread over the month before I signed the deed transfer. I saved screenshots of all of them. Mom, I just want to protect you from probate hassles later. You'll always live in the house. Derek and I would never take your home away from you. This is purely a paperwork thing for estate planning. Think of this as me taking care of you the way you took care of me. You'll stay in the house as long as you want. The lawyer says this is the smartest thing to do. You'll be protected and I'll have peace of mind. Win-win, and you keep your home. Obviously. I sent them all to Richard Sterling. Then I started my documentation journal. I bought a notebook, one of those black and white composition books like kids use in school, and I started writing down everything, dated and timed. April 28th, 4:15 p.m. Derek arrived unannounced, measured dining room, said, "These measurements will be useful when we renovate." Made me feel like a guest in my own home. April 30th, 11 o'clock a.m. Vanessa called, asked if I'd given any thought to senior living options. When I said no, she said, "You can't just bury your head in the sand, Mom. We need to move forward." Tone was impatient, dismissive. May 3rd, 2:30 p.m. Derek showed up with a real estate agent. Actually brought a realtor into my house without permission. Said they were just getting a market analysis. Agent looked uncomfortable when I asked why they needed a market analysis on a house with someone living in it. Derek said, "It's not your concern, Dorothy." The agent left quickly. I documented everything. Every visit, every call, every slight. And I did what Doris had suggested. I started recording conversations. The first recording was Derek telling me that I was being difficult and ungrateful because I'd refused to meet with a representative from Pine Grove Assisted Living. "You should be thanking us," he said, his voice clear on the recording. "We could have just kicked you out immediately. The house is in Vanessa's name. But we're being generous, giving you time to adjust. And this is how you repay us? With attitude?" "This is my home," I said on the recording, my voice shaking but firm. "It was your home. Now it's ours. Get used to it." I had 12 recordings by the end of May. I sent them all to Richard Sterling. In June, Vanessa stopped being subtle. She called me on June 3rd. "Mom, Derek and I have made a decision. We need to be in the house by July 15th. That gives you 6 weeks to find a place and move out." "No," I said simply. "Excuse me?" I said no. I'm not moving. This is my home. "It's my house," she said, her voice rising. "I own it. I have the deed. You have no legal right to be there." "Then you'll have to evict me," I said, and my voice was steady. "Have your lawyers contact my lawyer." There was a stunned silence. "You have a lawyer?" "I do. Richard Sterling. You can reach him at—" She hung up on me. That evening, she showed up at my door with Derek. I had my phone in my pocket recording. "Mom, this is insane," Vanessa said, pushing past me into the hallway. "You can't afford a lawyer. You're on a fixed income." "I'm managing," I said. "This is such a waste of money," Derek added. "You're going to spend your entire savings fighting us in court, and you're going to lose anyway. We own the house." "Maybe," I said. "But I've lived here for 42 years. I have rights." "No, you don't," he snapped. "You signed away every right when you transferred the deed. Your lawyer is ripping you off." "Derek, I think you should leave," I said quietly. "We'll go when we're ready," he said. "This is Vanessa's house, remember? We can come and go as we please." "Actually, you can't," I said. "I still live here. I still have a right to privacy and peaceful enjoyment of the property. If you don't leave, I'll call the police for trespassing." "Trespassing?" Vanessa laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "In my own house?" "You don't live here," I said. "I do. Leave. Now." They left, but not before Derek told me I was making a huge mistake and that I was going to regret this. I sent the recording to Richard Sterling that night. 2 weeks later, I received the formal eviction notice, which brings me back to that Tuesday morning, the lawyer at my door, my daughter watching coldly as I was told I had 72 hours to leave my home. After they left that day, after I'd closed the door and poured my coffee and allowed myself that small secret smile, I sat down and called Richard Sterling. "They served me," I told him. 72-hour eviction notice." "I expected that," he said. "Don't worry. I've already prepared our response. But Dorothy, I need to tell you something. This is going to get ugly. Your daughter is playing hardball, and her husband is pushing her hard. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I thought about Gerald, how hard we'd worked to buy this house. I thought about teaching Vanessa to ride a bike in the driveway, about Christmas mornings in the living room, about Gerald's last days in the upstairs bedroom. I thought about 42 years of memories, of life, of home. "I'm sure," I said. "Good, because I found something interesting when I did some digging into your daughter's finances." He paused. "She and Derek are in serious financial trouble. They've got $78,000 in credit card debt, they're 3 months behind on their mortgage, and Derek was laid off from his job 2 months ago. This isn't about wanting your house because it's nice. This is about desperation. They need your house so they can sell their current house and pay off their debts." "So I'm being thrown out so they can fix their financial mess?" I said, anger flaring hot in my chest. "Essentially, yes. But Dorothy, this is also good for us, because it shows motive. It shows why they'd engage in elder financial abuse. When we go to court, we can paint a very clear picture." "When do we go to court?" "I'll file for an emergency restraining order tomorrow morning, blocking the eviction. Then we'll request a full hearing. I'm also going to file a civil suit against your daughter for fraud and elder abuse, and I'm going to contact Adult Protective Services." "I don't need protection," I said quickly. "I'm fine." "I know you are. But there's a paper trail we need to establish. Documentation. It all helps." Over the next 3 days, I packed exactly 2 suitcases, just as the eviction notice required. But I didn't pack clothes or toiletries. I packed documents. Every piece of paper related to the house: the original mortgage, payment records, property tax receipts, Gerald's death certificate, my will, the deed transfer documents, copies of all my text messages with Vanessa, transcripts of the recordings I'd made, my documentation journal, character references from my friends, letters from my doctor stating that I was mentally and physically competent. I packed proof. I packed evidence. I packed my case. On Friday morning, exactly 72 hours after being served, there was another knock on my door. This time it was Richard Sterling, holding a court order. "Emergency restraining order granted," he said, smiling. You don't have to go anywhere. Your daughter and her husband are prohibited from entering this property without your permission pending the hearing. And Dorothy? The judge was not happy when he read your documentation. Not happy at all. I cried then. Not tears of sadness this time, but relief. The hearing was set for 3 weeks later. In that time, Vanessa tried to call me repeatedly. I didn't answer. She sent texts. Mom, please, let's just talk about this. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. I can't believe you're doing this to your own daughter. Do you know how much this is costing us in legal fees? You're being selfish. I saved every text message. She showed up at my door twice. Both times, I called Richard Sterling, who called the police to enforce the restraining order. Both times, she was told to leave. Both times, I documented it. My WhatsApp group rallied around me. Patricia came over every evening. Margaret brought meals. Doris organized a schedule where one of them would be with me every afternoon, just for company. They'd also be witnesses if Vanessa tried anything. This is what we do, Patricia said firmly. We're old, not helpless, and nobody messes with our people. The hearing was on July 12th, a Wednesday. Richard Sterling had prepared me thoroughly. We arrived at the courthouse at 8:30 a.m. Vanessa and Derek were already there with their lawyer, a woman named Patricia Vance, who looked expensive and aggressive. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom. I didn't look at Vanessa. I couldn't. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Judge Rita Callahan. She'd reviewed our filings in advance, Richard had told me, and she'd had some strong preliminary opinions. Vanessa's lawyer went first, arguing that the property was legally my daughter's, that I had no lease agreement, and that she had every right to occupy her own home. Then Richard stood up. Your Honor, he began. This case is about elder financial abuse, pure and simple. Mrs. Whitmore was coerced into transferring her home, her security, her life's work, to her daughter under false pretenses. The defendant explicitly told her mother that this transfer was purely for estate planning, that Mrs. Whitmore would continue to live in the home indefinitely. I have 17 text messages stating this explicitly. He presented the screenshots, blown up on a display board for the court. I have recordings of the defendant's husband telling Mrs. Whitmore that she was now homeless, that they would tear out her kitchen cabinets, that she needed to accept reality. I have documentation showing that the defendants are in severe financial distress, $78,000 in unsecured debt, facing foreclosure on their own home, and that they specifically targeted Mrs. Whitmore's home as a solution to their financial problems. He paused, looking at the judge. Your Honor, Mrs. Whitmore is 71 years old. She has lived in that house for 42 years. She is healthy, independent, and mentally competent. She has done nothing wrong except trust her own daughter. And now that daughter wants to throw her out with 72 hours' notice. This is exactly the kind of elder abuse that our laws are designed to prevent. Vanessa's lawyer argued back, claiming that I was a difficult woman, that I'd been offered assistance in finding new housing, that this was a simple property dispute. Then the judge asked if I wanted to speak. I stood up slowly. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was firm. Your Honor, I said, I taught 3rd grade for 30 years. I've wiped noses and bandaged knees and taught hundreds of children to read. I raised my daughter alone after my husband died. I saved every penny to send her to college. When she got married, I gave her $15,000 for her wedding. When her first child was born, I flew across the country to help her for 3 weeks. I've been a good mother. My voice cracked slightly, but I continued. And when she told me she wanted the deed to my house just for paperwork, just to avoid probate, I believed her. Because she's my daughter. You're supposed to be able to trust your daughter. I looked at Vanessa for the first time since we'd entered the courtroom. She was staring at her hands. I don't have much, Your Honor. I have my pension and my Social Security. I have some savings. I have my friends. And I have my home. It's where my husband died. It's where I've lived my entire adult life. It's all I have left of the family we built together. And my daughter wants to take it away from me so she can sell it and pay off her credit cards. I sat down. The courtroom was very quiet. Judge Callahan looked at Vanessa. Mrs. Hartwell, I've reviewed the evidence in this case, and I have to say, I'm disturbed. Your lawyer has argued that this is a simple property dispute, but the evidence shows something quite different. It shows a pattern of deception, manipulation, and financial elder abuse. Your Honor, I never meant, Vanessa started. I'm not finished, the judge said firmly. You explicitly told your mother, in writing, that she would continue to live in the house. You told her this was about estate planning, not about taking her home. And then, the moment the deed was transferred, you began making plans to evict her. That's fraud. She shuffled papers on her desk. However, I have to acknowledge that the deed transfer is legal. Your mother signed it willingly, with a lawyer present. I cannot undo that transfer. My heart sank. But, the judge continued, I can and will protect Mrs. Whitmore from the consequences of your deception. I am issuing an order granting Mrs. Whitmore a life estate in the property. That means she has the legal right to live in that house for the rest of her life. You own the property, Mrs. Hartwell, but you cannot occupy it, sell it, or otherwise use it while your mother is alive. She will pay the property taxes and maintenance costs, as she's been doing, and she will live there undisturbed. Vanessa's face went white. But, Your Honor, we can't. You should have thought of that before you defrauded your mother, Judge Callahan said coldly. Additionally, I'm ordering you to pay your mother's legal fees in this case, which I understand amount to approximately $8,000 so far. And I'm issuing a permanent restraining order. You and your husband are not to contact Mrs. Whitmore or come within 500 feet of her property except by her explicit invitation. Your Honor, please, Derek said, standing up. We have 3 kids. We're about to lose our house. We need... Then perhaps you should get your financial house in order, the judge said sharply. This court is adjourned. I walked out of that courtroom with Richard Sterling beside me and my 3 friends waiting in the hallway. Patricia hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. Margaret was crying. Doris was already taking pictures for the WhatsApp group, which has been following this whole saga. You did it, Richard said, shaking my hand. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected him. All of us. Behind me, I heard Vanessa calling. Mom, please, can we just talk? I turned around. She was standing in the courthouse hallway, mascara running, looking younger and more desperate than I'd seen her in years. Derek was beside her, his face red with anger. Please, Vanessa said. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Derek said, he told me we had to. Please, can we just talk? No, I said quietly. You made your choice. You chose money over your mother. You chose your husband's financial problems over the woman who raised you. And now you have to live with that choice. But Mom! Don't call me that, I said. You lost the right to call me that when you tried to throw me out of my home. When you told me I was underutilizing the house where I raised you. When you stood in my kitchen and told me I had 72 hours to leave. The judge said you have to pay her legal fees, Derek snarled. That's another $8,000 on top of everything else. You just destroyed us. I didn't destroy you, I said calmly. You destroyed yourselves. And you tried to destroy me in the process. The difference is, I fought back. I walked away, surrounded by my friends, and I didn't look back. That was 3 months ago. I'm still in my house. Every morning I wake up at 6:30, make my coffee, and take my walk through Riverside Park. I water my garden and tend to my roses. I go to my watercolor class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have dinner with Patricia, Doris, and Margaret once a week, and we laugh about old times and share stories about our ungrateful children. Because it turns out, I'm not the only one with a difficult child. Margaret's son borrowed $30,000 from her and never paid it back. Patricia's daughter hasn't called her in 2 years because Patricia refused to co-sign on a car loan. Doris's son moved to California and only calls on Christmas. We're a club now. The Difficult Children Club, Margaret calls it. We meet every Tuesday morning for coffee at Patricia's house, and we support each other. We remind each other that we're not invisible, not helpless, not disposable. Vanessa tried to call twice after the hearing. I didn't answer. She sent a card on my birthday last month, generic, store-bought, with a message that said, "Thinking of you." I threw it away. Richard Sterling called last week to tell me that Vanessa and Derek declared bankruptcy. They lost their house. They're renting a 2-bedroom apartment now, and according to Patricia's sources, she's still very well connected, they're fighting constantly. I should feel sorry for them. Maybe I should. They're my daughter and her family, and they're struggling. But I don't, because I remember standing in my hallway while a stranger told me I had to leave my home. I remember my daughter's cold voice saying, "It's my house." I remember being told I was underutilizing my own life, my own home, my own memories. And I remember making the choice to fight back. My grandchildren, Lily, Owen, and Harper, I do miss them. That's the hardest part. But I've learned that sometimes standing up for yourself means losing things you love. It means accepting that some relationships are built on conditions, and when you stop meeting those conditions, the relationship ends. I've updated my will. Everything I have, the house, my savings, everything, goes to my 3 best friends, to be divided equally among them. They're the family I chose, and they chose me back. I'm 71 years old. I live alone in a 4-bedroom house, and I'm not lonely. I have my garden and my books and my watercolor paintings. I have my friends and my routines and my dignity. And every morning, when I wake up in the bedroom I shared with Gerald for 37 years, when I walk down the staircase he refinished, when I make coffee in the kitchen where we raised our daughter, I feel grateful. Grateful that I fought back. Grateful that I didn't let them win. Grateful that I chose myself, finally, after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. Would you have forgiven them? Or would you have stood your ground like I did? Sometimes I wonder if younger people understand what it's like to be treated as invisible in your own family. To be seen as an obstacle, a burden, something to be managed and moved aside. We spent our lives raising our children, sacrificing for them, putting them first. And then when we're old, some of them decide we're in the way. But I'll tell you what I learned. Being old doesn't mean being powerless. It doesn't mean accepting whatever scraps your children decide to give you. And it definitely doesn't mean going quietly when someone tries to take everything you've built. I'm Dorothy Whitmore. I'm 71 years old. I live in the house I've lived in for 42 years, and I'm going to die here someday. But on my terms, in my time, in my home. And that, I've learned, is worth fighting for.